In a quiet neighbourhood in The Hague, a woman seemed to disappear without warning. Her name was Sharmila Shinde. She was a wife, a mother, and an Indian woman living thousands of kilometres away from home, until she was nowhere to be seen. When the questions began, the answers did not come easily. There were missing pieces, unexplained movements, and a silence that only grew heavier with time. Then, investigators entered the home, and what they found inside would turn the disappearance into one of the most chilling cases connected to the Indian community in the Netherlands. This is the story of that one woman and that one home in The Hague where something terrifying happened. This is the story of Sharmila Shinde. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest stories from around South Asia. I'm your host Aryaan.
And I'm Aishwarya.
And the case that I have for you today cuts across borders and cuts across the emotions of people from two nations because it left everybody shocked and without answers.
Aryaan, I don't think we've ever covered a case of the Indian diaspora in the Netherlands. I think this might be the first one.
Yeah, we've touched Scandinavia.
We have.
We've skipped Netherlands and gone to UK.
Yeah.
But never Netherlands.
Never Netherlands.
A country I love because I've been there.
A country I love because I really want to go there and haven't been able to.
I was in Amsterdam 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Really?
Like a month ago.
That's crazy.
Yeah. You didn't know?
No.
I was in Amsterdam a month ago. Like when I was in Paris, got it. Quick story. The worst story, I don't know if I told you this. I went there to see one of my favorite musicians ever, Simon and Garfunkel. Basically,
Right.
Simon, not Garfunkel. Paul Simon was performing. And I was so excited to see this legend who's, I think 1971 Central Park concert. I have heard so many times over and over again, the whole album. You have Scarborough Fair, Boxer,
No idea
Sound
what
of
you're talking
Silence, Bridge Over Troubled Water. I was so excited and I spent too much money. And if you want to refund me, please become a patron because I did end up wasting a lot of money. Aishwarya, the man's voice in 1971 and the man's voice in 2026 are two different people. It was so bad.
No way.
It was so bad.
That makes me really
It
sad.
made me so sad. I mean, he could barely sing and it was... as much as I love the city, it was one of the worst concerts I've ever been to.
Were you there with someone? Did people
I was
agree
with
that
Joe.
it was...
I was with Joe, a buddy of mine, who he hung it over my head through the trip
That's
of
so
how much
funny.
money I wasted because it was me who wanted to go.
To be fair, we did see Billy Joel perform back in 2021, 2022.
Yeah. And he wasn't the Billy Joel of 1980, but he was
But he
still
was really good.
good. I mean...
But I guess that'll happen
Italian
sometime.
restaurant. See, I love him. But yeah, so be forewarned that old artists, are old artists.
Sometimes they don't sing like their younger version, and
But
that's okay.
as long as my voice remains like this, I will continue to narrate cases and to support Desi Crime and the engines that run it. Please become a patron. Or if you can't, hit the subscribe button. And with that, on with the case for today.
But before we get on with the episode, we need to let you all know that you can now get early access to all Desi Crime episodes on Amazon Music. To get your fix a whole 3 days before anyone else, go download the Amazon Music app today.
In the spring of 2019, a woman in India received a WhatsApp message from a best friend. Nothing unusual about that. The two of them texted all the time. They'd been friends since school in Pune, and even though life had taken her friend far away to a rented apartment on a quiet street called the Raspberry Street in The Hague in the Netherlands, the messages kept coming. Good morning texts, update about the kids, complaints about the weather, the usual rhythm of a close friendship maintained across time zones. But something about the message did not sit right. This message read, quote, "Babe, was busy in kids cycling, just got up." That was it. Breezy, casual. But wrong in a way that the friend couldn't quite articulate at first. She read it again. Then she remembered the time difference between India and the Netherlands meant that when she received the message, it was approximately 3:30 a.m. in The Hague. Nobody goes cycling at 3:30, even in a country known for everybody cycling. Quote, I remember she never sent incomplete sentences. Also, given the time difference between India and the Netherlands, how can one go cycling around 3:30 a.m.? End quote. She was particular about how she expressed herself, even in casual texts. But in these texts, the rhythm was off. The voice was off. The woman who was allegedly writing these texts in The Hague was a woman named Sharmila Shinde. She was 36 years old. She had 2 children, 13-year-old twins. She had moved to The Hague just a few weeks earlier, reluctantly, to try and save her marriage to a man named Avdut Shinde. And when a friend reached out to another friend who lived closer to The Hague to go and check on her, nobody answered the door at Raspberry Street. Sharmila's neighbor said she hadn't been seen in weeks. Her husband's office confirmed he hadn't shown up to work since May 17th. On May 21st, 2019, Dutch police entered that apartment on Raspberry Street. What they found inside that flat, specifically inside the refrigerator in that flat, was a discovery so horrifying that the neighbors placed bouquets outside the building for weeks on end in grief. Sharmila Shinde's decomposed body had been stored inside a refrigerator in her own home. The cause of death would be subject to investigation, but her body was in advanced state of decomposition, suggesting she had been dead for weeks during which she had been texting from her phone. By the time Dutch police made this discovery on May 21st, 2019, Avdut Shinde, Sharmila's husband, the prime suspect in her death, had already been on Indian soil for 3 days. He had flown from Amsterdam to Mumbai on May 18th with the couple's twin children. He had gone to his father Madhukar's home in Mumbai suburb of Malad, where he had dropped off the children, left their luggage, and walked back out the door. And then Avdut vanished. His father Madhukar filed a missing persons complaint about his own son on May 21st, the same day Dutch police found Sharmila's body. But to understand how Sharmila Shinde's life took the turns it did, you have to go back 14 years, to 2005, to a shipping company's office in Powai, Mumbai. Powai, for those of you who don't know, is a commercial hub built around a lake full of office towers and tech companies and the kind of corporate cafeterias where you eat the same sad sandwich every Tuesday. It was in one of those offices, the Mumbai branch of the global shipping giant Maersk, that Sharmila and Avdut Shinde met. The couple were colleagues, and by all accounts, Sharmila was warm, dependable, and well-liked. She had a wide circle of friends, people she had known since school in Pune. Avdut too came across as capable, a shipping executive with a career that would eventually take him to postings abroad. They fell into what appeared as a romance, the kind that begins in meeting rooms and lunch breaks and commutes. But even at the beginning, something was off. Quote, Avdut and Sharmila started dating in 2005. One day, Avdut saw her with a common friend and got angry. He told Sharmila that if she really loves him, she has to marry him. Hence, she tied the knot with him in court on December 31st, 2005, said one of her former colleagues speaking to the midday newspaper. Think about the shape of that story for a moment, because it's a shape that we've seen before on Desi Crime. 2 people are dating. The man sees his girlfriend with a male friend, not a romantic partner, just a friend. He doesn't ask questions, he doesn't talk it through. He issues an ultimatum. Marry me now or it means you don't love me. And Sharmila, who cared about this relationship, who was trying to be a good partner, said, okay, let's get married. They were married in a court ceremony on December 31st, New Year's Eve of 2005. And within that marriage, the pattern that had begun on that day, the pattern of suspicion, control, and ultimatums, never stopped. Friends say Avdut began spying on Sharmila before they were even married. He had the passwords to her Facebook account and her email. He had logged into her WhatsApp to read through her messages. He monitored who she spoke to, who she went out with, where she went. He had heated arguments with her over financial expenditures. And friends who spoke to Midday say his apparent strategy was to drain Sharmila's bank accounts and render her financially dependent on him, to make leaving him economically impossible. One of her friends said, quote, she never cheated on him, but he had been spying on her even before they got married. A neighbor in Pune, where the couple lived for several years after marriage, described Avdut as a, quote, tyrant around the house, and Sharmila as a, quote, innocent victim who loved him deeply. That combination, the woman who loves deeply and the man who mistakes possession for love, is one of the most dangerous configurations in a domestic relationship. And the research on intimate partner violence bears this out. The more a woman invests emotionally in the hope that things will change, the harder it becomes to leave. And the more a controlling partner senses that investment, the less incentive he has to stop.
Aryaan, something like this is so sad to me because when we talk about what we can do to empower our women, we can give them financial security, we can give them the means to earn their own livelihood. We can give them situations where if they choose to leave, there is social support, where it seems like she had the friends to be able to do it. And even then, sometimes we find in these stories that women end up in these situations where they're just not able to leave.
Yeah.
And I think that's so sad. And in a case like this, I don't even know what the solution is. I don't want to say that there is no way out.
To pin it on merely a systemic reason says to the next woman listening to this podcast going, I find myself in a similar situation, oh, there's nothing I can do because it's a systemic fault. And that's
Right.
not the case. That's something I want to make clear, that while there are systemic forces, one can say patriarchal causes, social causes, sometimes getting out of a relationship is not as deep as patriarchy.
Right.
Sometimes it's just as deep as two individuals in a very convoluted dynamic.
Yeah.
To them, we want to say, you being abused, whether it is mentally or physically
Or financially.
or financially, it's not your fault.
Yeah.
But there is still a way to get out of it. Because
There
I
is.
don't want somebody to drown in the hopelessness of, I can't leave this, because you can.
I agree.
Now, despite this toxic dynamic, for years the couple continued to live in Pune. They had twin children together. There were good moments, presumably. There must have been, because Sharmila stayed. But also, that abuse escalated. It found new forms. At some point, Avdut's career took him to Amsterdam, where he was posted by his employer. He began living there while Sharmila and the children remained in Pune. The physical distance between them seems to have given Sharmila some room to breathe, to think. Friends noticed she seemed more herself now. She had reconnected with people she'd lost touch with during the marriage, including old friends from school who Avdut had over the years tried to isolate her from. It was at a school reunion that Sharmila met a lawyer friend who would become important to the story. A woman she confided in about the state of her marriage and who Sharmila consulted about the possibility of filing for divorce. You see, Sharmila was done, or at least she was trying to be done. The wheels were beginning to turn. And then, December 23rd, 2018 happened. On December 23rd, 2018, 2 days before Christmas, Avdut flew into Mumbai from Amsterdam. We don't know the precise details of what happened inside the Shinde home that evening, but what we do know is the aftermath. Sharmila fainted. Her face was swollen. There was a dark patch under her right eye, bruising consistent with a hard impact. A neighbor speaking to a newspaper later would describe what she saw. Avdut, rather than taking his injured wife to a doctor, restricted her outings until her wounds had healed. He wanted the evidence to disappear before anyone saw it. He wanted the story to stay inside the house. What happens in the Avdut household stays in the Avdut household, he hoped. But Sharmila's friends saw it. The fading marks of the injury were photographed and would later be shared with investigators. And on January 31st, 2019, 5 weeks after the assault, on their wedding anniversary, Sharmila went to the Kodwa police station in Pune and filed a non-cognizable complaint against her husband. A non-cognizable complaint, or NC complaint, is the lowest tier of formal police action in India. It doesn't automatically trigger an investigation. The police do record it, but they are not required to act on it with urgency. It is unfortunately the standard first response to domestic violence reports in India. You file it, and then you wait. Around the same time, Sharmila sought legal advice about divorcing Avdut. She told her lawyer friend what had been happening. She told her friends from school. And her friends, who had watched this marriage from the outside for years, were in no doubt about what needed to happen next. Sharmila needed to leave. But Avdut wasn't going to make that easy. Back in Amsterdam, he was making plans of his own. He wanted Sharmila and the children to come and join him in the Netherlands. He called her. He pushed. Sharmila, deeply reluctant, refused. She had just filed a police complaint against him. She was talking to a divorce lawyer. She had no interest in moving to a foreign country with a man who had left bruises on her face a month earlier. But then Avdut changed tactics. He used the children. One of her friends recalls, quote, she was never willing to leave Pune, but Avdut forced her to come along to the Netherlands using the children as an excuse, end quote. The specifics of exactly how Avdut leveraged the children to persuade Sharmila aren't fully documented, but the pattern is well known to people who work with victims of domestic abuse. A controlling partner uses the children as both incentive and threat. Come with me. Come keep the family together. Come give the marriage one more chance. Or I'll make things very difficult for you when it comes to custody, when it comes to the children's future. Women who might easily leave for themselves find it infinitely harder to leave when children are involved. Still, Sharmila was frightened enough by the prospect of being alone with Avdut in a foreign country that she took an extraordinary precautionary step before agreeing to go. She made him sign an affidavit, a legal document signed by Avdut Shinde declaring that he would not harm her. We've covered so many domestic violence cases. I have never come across a signed legal
Never.
affidavit
Yeah. Presented by the victim
to not be harmed. And as absurd as it is, part of me thinks, Sharmila, if you were that sure that you might be harmed,
Why would you?
why
go?
would you? And again, blaming the victim in such a situation is so easy. You don't spend any time trying to understand what made her come to that decision. But as a viewer, as somebody researching this case, I had to ask, if you made him sign an affidavit, why?
I don't know. I think this is just so sad to me, so infuriating on all fronts. Maybe it is just the children. Maybe it is thinking that it's their lives on the line as well. If there is a custody battle and this man has the children, who knows how abusive he's going to be.
And I don't want to be the mother that prevented
Abandoned
my
her
children
children.
from having a life in Europe, all those things, maybe with social pressures. I get it. It's just, I have never come across an affidavit being signed by the perpetrator
Yeah.
that, hey, I'm not going to harm you.
Yeah. And then we know what's coming.
In early 2019, Sharmila Shinde, with an affidavit of no harm in her handbag, a police complaint on file in Pune, and a divorce lawyer's number saved in her phone, boarded a flight to Amsterdam with her twin children. She moved into a rented apartment on Raspberry Street in The Hague. And something happened there, in that apartment, in the weeks that followed. Something that Sharmila did not survive. What happened in those weeks is not fully known. The Dutch police were investigating a homicide, but the cause of death, given the state of decomposition, was difficult to determine with precision. What we know is that Sharmila's sister-in-law, Harini Shetty, told reporters there were injury marks on the body. We know that the Dutch police classified the case as manslaughter and ultimately murder, and declared Avdut a wanted suspect. Quote, "We have learned that Avdut had been giving Sharmila a hard time. Some friends said that Avdut deliberately brought her there to kill her. Whether the move was premeditated, whether Avdut had planned from the beginning to bring Sharmila to a foreign country where she was isolated, far from her friends and family, legally dependent on him and unable to navigate the Dutch system on her own, is something only Avdut can answer. But what the evidence suggests is that by April 2019, Sharmila was dead. In April, the children began asking Avdut where their mother was. He told them they would meet her in India. The children, 13 years old and presumably confused and frightened, believed their father. Avdut booked the flights, he packed up the children's luggage, he flew from Amsterdam to Mumbai, and with his 2 children arrived at Madhukar's home in Malad. He dropped off the children and the luggage and did not explain to his father what happened to his wife. And then he walked out, and Avdut Shinde disappeared. Meanwhile, on May 21st in The Hague, her body was brought out of the refrigerator because the texts that were uncovered showed that something strange was happening. Anita Gehasi, a detective from The Hague, told reporters, quote, "The neighbors are deeply shocked and horrified following the mysterious death. They've placed bouquets at the entrance to the house where Sharmila lived with her husband and children." When asked about the injury marks on Sharmila's body, she said, "It is part of our investigation at this stage. We cannot reveal anything that could hamper it. The mystery will be unraveled only after her husband is traced and interrogated." Sharmila's body was brought back to India. She was 36 years old. Her mother Sushila, whose health had already deteriorated after the news, received her daughter at her home in Bhandup on May 23rd. Sharmila's funeral was held in Vikhroli. Her father died 15 years earlier. There is something particularly cold about what appears to have happened with Sharmila's phone after her death. If Avdut Shinde did kill his wife, and he's the prime suspect in a Dutch manslaughter investigation, the investigation suggests that having done so, he picked up her phone and began composing messages to her friends in her voice as though nothing had happened, as though she was still alive, still upstairs, still tapping away at her screen. But her friends told Midday that this wasn't the first time Avdut mimicked her voice, at least her digital voice. Because he had so much access to her life, he used to constantly send texts to get information out of her friends. But performing a person's voice perfectly is harder than it looks. Once investigation began, which was almost instantly after the body was found, this was the first thing that came to light. The phone and the laptop Avdut used to send those messages were later found at his father's home in Malad, where he had left them along with the children and the luggage. Now, the Dutch police had formally announced that Avdut was a wanted suspect in the death of Sharmila Shinde. And by this time, they also contacted Interpol, which is the international police, and issued an administrative request to the Mumbai police to locate him and arrest him. But by this point also, Avdut had been on the run. And he wasn't carrying his own phone, obviously. He was calling his father from the phones of strangers, rickshaw drivers, passerbys, literally anybody that would let him place a call and check in on his children. He simply refused to come home despite his father urging him to, for the sake of his children. Police tracked this fugitive to Konkan, a region of Maharashtra which is a vast rural belt that runs across the coast. Despite just having killed his wife and cut up her body and stored her in a fridge, he was visiting temples in Maharashtra. But after the final reports of having seen him at a temple, that trail went cold. And so the Dutch police changed gears. Now what happened here, or rather what didn't happen, is one of the most frustrating parts of the entire case. They interviewed Sharmila's friends and relatives in India and Pune by video and voice call. Now in investigations that span borders, complications arise that are more technical and bureaucratic in nature. For example, a senior Dutch officer said Avdut Shinde was their suspect from day one, and they had in fact sent reports to both the Interpol and the Mumbai police. Their formal request read, quote, "Arrest him and hand him over to Dutch authorities as he is a murder-manslaughter suspect." The same officer later said, quote, "We sent our revised request last week to locate and arrest Avdut. I don't know why the cops there are delaying it." The Mumbai police's response to this was, to put it charitably, confused. Initially, they said they had only been told to trace Avdut, not to arrest him, because the case was registered in a foreign country and they couldn't legally detain him without clear instruction. Then when the Dutch request was clarified and reissued through Interpol, the Mumbai police said they had already stopped tracing him because the original request had been ambiguous. They then said that they were starting the search again. They issued a lookout circular alerting airports, bus stations and railway terminals. They were monitoring ticket counters and checking bank transactions. Cyber teams were tracking his movements. And yet, as of the last available reporting, September 2019, 4 months after Sharmila's body was found, Avdut Shinde has not been apprehended or tracked. Meanwhile, Sharmila's friends are fighting their own battle, trying to get the Indian police to take the case seriously. The NC complained she had filed at the Kondwa police station in Pune in January of 2019. The report of the December assault that had left bruises on her face had never been upgraded. It was still a non-cognizable offence. It had never become an FIR. In the weeks after Sharmila's death, her friends approached senior Pune police officials and asked them to convert the NC into an FIR because that was the whole point of an NC. An FIR would mean the case became cognizable under Indian law, meaning police would be obligated to investigate it, meaning more resources would be allocated, meaning the domestic violence charge would be used as independent evidence in the broader murder investigation. One of Sharmila's friends called the Pune Joint Commissioner of Police and requested a meeting. The Joint CP in that meeting said he would look through the case files and extend all possible help. But it still remains unclear as of current reporting whether the conversion to FIR was ultimately processed. Another of Sharmila's friends said something that sticks with me. Quote, "Everything points to him, but he is yet to be arrested." She said this 4 months after Sharmila was found. And she was right on both counts. All of this confusion is in part a consequence of the fact that domestic violence against women in India is profoundly underreported. And when it is reported, the response from police is, at least statistically, inadequate. Sharmila had taken every step that a woman in her position could reasonably take. And she was still dead. the international dimension of this case added another layer of complexity. Because the murder took place in Netherlands, the Dutch police had primary jurisdiction. The Mumbai police kept pointing to this fact as the reason they couldn't act more decisively. But Avdut was on Indian soil, he was an Indian citizen, and he was accessible if you knew where to look. And the police, with all their technical surveillance capabilities, had some sense of where to look. At the time of the last substantive reporting on this case, in late 2019, Avdut Shinde remains at large. In fact, he's still at large. Having disappeared 6 years ago, he could literally be anywhere. In India, or maybe in Europe, or maybe somewhere else entirely. But the investigations against him are still open. If you or someone you know recognize this man or this description, an Indian man in his mid to late 40s now, last known to be in the Konkan region of Maharashtra in mid-2019, worked as a shipping executive, likely has professional level English, has twin teenage children, now 19 and 20, living with their grandfather Madhukaran Malad, reach out to the numbers on the screen or in the description.
If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Karak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.